Area clear and secure.
General Kenobi, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars. Now he begs you to help him in his struggle against the Empire. I regret that I am unable to present my father's request to you in person, but my ship has fallen under attack, and I'm afraid my mission to bring you to Alderaan has failed. I have placed information vital to the survival of the rebellion into the memory systems of this R2 unit. My father will know how to retrieve it. You must see this droid safely delivered to him on Alderaan. This is our most desperate hour. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
We are part of the rebellion. Hey Zion, we're going to talk about deterministic universalism and gaslighting today. I'm going to break it down in 5 parts. The first 2 are very important because we're going to look at the theology and the psychology. There's theological determinism, hard predestination, universalism, and deterministic universalism. Theological determinism is the belief that humans have no free will and everything is predetermined by God. Hard predestination is the idea that God decrees all events, including evil, of course. Universalism is the belief that everyone will be saved, no exceptions. And deterministic universalism is a combination of all the things I've just described and how God predestines all things and ultimately saves all people. None of these ideas is abusive on their own, because people can hold to these ideologies peacefully. Which brings me to my second point in my 5-point presentation, which is the psychology, the behavior. When you have this mixed theology of deterministic universalism, hard predestination, theological determinism, and then you add gaslighting on top of that, that right there says there's something going on in the psychology as well as the theology. So you'll hear, you don't have free will, but you're wrong for not accepting my message. Or your disagreement is rebellion against God. Or your reaction might just provoke the person or the person with those certain beliefs to say that you're deceived. It's classic gaslighting, making you doubt your own reasoning, perception, and spiritual intuition. So in its own form, it is spiritual manipulation. So you got this weird theology, which can be peaceful if you uphold to it on your own, but then when you add gaslighting to it, then it metamorphs into something else. So the gaslighting, when added, it makes you doubt your own reasoning, perception, or spiritual intuition, as I would like to say. Spiritual manipulation, when you have a theology and then you add gaslighting on top of it. And the whole point of the gaslighting is to make you doubt your own reasoning. Part of that spiritual manipulation is using God's will as a weapon. If evil happens, God wanted it. That's a form of spiritual abuse. That is being in an abusive relationship with your deity. So when someone insists my interpretation is the only correct one and you disagree, they say you're resisting God's will or you're resisting God and his purpose. That aligns with authoritarian religious behavior. We've seen this in the history of cults and cults leaders. It's contradictory logic. So if you claim you have no free will, or I have no free will, but you're morally wrong for not agreeing with me, This is a contradiction in itself. It's called control. When you put the theology and the behavior together, the pattern resembles deterministic spiritual fatalism. Everything is God's will, including evil. That is fatalism. Prophetic self-authorization is when a person believes he is the messenger, and you must accept this message. You must accept this theology because this is the right theology. This is God's will. This is prophetic self-authorization. I'm the messenger. I have the right message. I did the research. I put in the work. Also, gaslighting through doctrine, using theology to invalidate another person's perspective, is also part of a pattern. And you'll see people having this issue with circular reasoning because of this theology. This theology causes circular reasoning. You disagree because God made you disagree, but also you're wrong for disagreeing. It's a misuse of theology just so a person can maintain power in a conversation. So what does it say about a person who holds to deterministic universalism, but also uses gaslighting in their psychology? It just means that they're a religious narcissist. They have a spiritual grandiosity, believing they uniquely understand God's plan, using God to elevate themselves. And they have doctrinal absolutes. Explain why the conversations with a person that holds to this weird theology impossible. So there's a level of psychology and a level of theology. You mix those two together, the conversation can feel impossible. So in my age of wisdom, I want to say this. You can debate universalism or determinism with someone who is healthy. And I want to repeat that. You can debate universalism or determinism with someone who is healthy. You cannot debate with someone who uses doctrine as a shield for manipulation. You have to know the two, or else you're going to go crazy and you're going to be unhealthy. And when I say you can debate these things with someone who is healthy, they have to understand if you or I have no free will, then my disagreement is also God's will. They have to understand that because that is their theology. But for someone who is unhealthy, they will even debate that and use gaslighting as a form of spiritual abuse. So when you say, I have no free will, then my disagreement is also God's will. It will force a healthy person into their own logic without arguing from an emotional standpoint. Also, part of this psychology, as I want to say, when they have this theology, they want you inside their worldview so they can dominate the conversation. But you can step out of their worldview and say, hey, I'm not debating inside your worldview. I'm telling you, I don't accept your interpretation. And that is stepping out of their worldview. It removes their power and their way of defining the rule. That's when you will probably see the gaslighting because you're arguing with an unhealthy person. And then when you're stepping out of the arena or their worldview, you can just politely say, we're not having this discussion if you're going to claim your worldview is the only one God approves. Because you're dealing with a narcissist. The gaslighting thrives when you try to prove you're not deceived. And you don't owe anyone that. And I just wanted to point these things out, that if a person has no free will, but you're wrong for not believing me, you need to recognize the mental state and the psychology mixed with the theology, and know this is something that you're not going to win. You're dealing with a certain theology that is combined of just the most hardcore, predeterministic, spiritual grandiosity, doctrinal absolute.
Not with me, then you're my enemy.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes. I will do what I must.
You will try.
Again, dealing with a person who's not healthy. Debate people who uses God to silence you, saying you're deceived, you're resisting God's will, you're rejecting the truth. Who's also weaponizing determinism by saying you have no free will, and therefore that excuses their behavior. It removes your agency, and it shuts down your objections. And all it does is just make you question your reasoning, your spiritual intuition, which is a God gift. We have volition and we have intuition. There's always going to be that voice, that Holy Spirit saying, nah, this guy is, or this girl, or something's not right. That removes that agency and your understanding of God and your personal relationship with God. And no one person can say, only I understand what God is doing. And if you disagree, you're wrong, because that goes back to the circular argument. If it's God's will, then he's telling me that you're wrong. And I need to understand how my relationship works with God and why he's telling me that your theology is wrong. Now, anyway, I just want to let you know how to get out of those bad relationships. This is your sis, Nisha.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only